So we have, first up, Gillian Crampton Smith. She's going to come over here. And then we're doing something like a little, what I feel is very MozFest. The two speakers, Emily and Sarah, met at MozFest and they decided, hey, we're just going to unite and speak together. So first of all, we've got Gillian.
It's great to be here, and this is my first MozFest. Have we got a slide? Yes, good. Okay, and hello to all of you out in the blue yonder who are listening to me streaming. I'll try and keep you in mind. It's difficult, I know, when you can't sense people out there. But I can't see anybody anyway because of the lights, so it's okay. Robust, useful, delightful. This was what 2,000 years ago the architect Vitruvius said buildings should have. And it was rediscovered in the Renaissance. And it's still what we expect from our material world. So things like our cars, our clothes, our cities. We hope that that's what we'll see. But increasingly, we live in a parallel environment, the internet environment. And though it's robust, it's far from uniformly convenient or delightful. And when I talk about the internet, I mean not just what we see in our browser, but all the other things that the internet makes possible for us. So Mozilla is about how we could develop the web for the common good. So I'm not going to talk about design being good for business, which it is, or for the fact that for the past 5 years, some of the big tech companies have changed their ratio of developers to designers by an order of magnitude. But what I want to talk about is how artist designers and engineer designers can together develop the future of the internet and make life there more pleasant for all of us. Many tech companies think that design is just about making things pretty at the end. Nice to have, but not essential. But actually, artist designer knowledge and skills are not just about making things pretty, they also make products work better. And when I started programming for the Apple II, it was a layout program, there wasn't much you could do on a green screen like this. And I realized, though, that basic graphic design skills and knowledge, like the structuring of information, reflecting it in typography and composition, leading the eye to the most important thing, was not being used in the design of software. And that although it couldn't probably make much difference to the beauty of things, it could definitely make things more efficient and easier to use. And there are lots of different kinds of artist designers, like there are lots of different kinds of engineers. And their training, though very different from engineers, can contribute to the design of products that fit people well. Although they understand the technology they're designing for, they all work with technical experts to bring the products into the world. For example, if you think of the Millennium Dome outside here, it was a close collaboration between the architect Richard Rogers and Buro Happel, the engineers, that made this fantastic building come into the world. Artist designers use their brains differently. The psychologist Aaron Zweig, in his book The Hidden Order of Art, calls it syncretistic thinking rather than analytic thinking. They syncretize new solutions from the memories, experiences that they have deep in their subconscious, and they don't necessarily know exactly how they do it. And they need to work in studios like this with other designers, and they need stimulus, a visual stimulus, audio stimulus, in order to generate this range of ideas that they need. And then they switch to the analytic mode of thinking to evaluate what they've come up with, and really to understand better in every iteration what the parameters of the problem they're confronting are. And this process can be extremely annoying to people who work in other ways. So it takes patience on both sides. And they're trained in the techniques of art, but for practical ends. So things like words, storytelling, poetry, graphics, composition, colour, rhythm, form, feel, texture, shape, sound and movement, and of course, interactivity. So they focus on the human qualities of a product. And this is what This is what Steve Jobs said. It's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with the liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing. And certainly Apple makes a lot of people's hearts sing, makes my heart sing. And it's a great pleasure. And also, of course, it makes their tills ring. So it works both ways, but it does give us a great deal of pleasure. But aesthetics is not only about look and feel. There's an aesthetic in something that works really well, satisfyingly well. And I like to call it the aesthetics of use. I'm sure you can think of examples. I've got lots in my kitchen. They give me pleasure every time I use them. For instance, this salad spinner, it looks quite good, but it's really horrible to use. Can I get sound on the videos? Music's okay, but so you can't hear the horrible sound of this one. But this is the one I have, and it's such a lovely feel to use, and that it's small differences, but it makes life, it's part of life's small pleasures. You might think that engineering and emotion is. Let's go back. 1, 2. Okay. Okay. You might think that engineering. I've got it in a muddle here. There we go. Engineering and emotion is a contradiction in terms. But psychologists are just beginning to understand the way that emotion, the processing of emotion in the brain, is connected with all kinds of other cognition. So, for instance, people who in their brain, the part of their brain which processes emotion has been damaged, they can't make decisions. And to such an extent that they're completely incapacitated. They can't make a decision to cross the road, for instance. Okay, right. Okay. And Don Norman, who wrote a book called Emotional Design, says everything has a personality. Everything sends an emotional signal. Even where this is not the intention of the designer, the people who view the website infer personalities and experience emotions. And even boring productivity software, like Intuit, they make software for ordinary people to do their tax returns. And the CEO said, he said something. Here we go. Most taxpayers are owed a refund. In this context, we began to think less about the pure functionality of our software and more about the emotional payoff of reducing drudgery and speeding the way towards a big windfall. So once you've got the function working, you can start to think about a whole load of other things. But even better, if you think about the both in parallel. They've also discovered, psychologists have also discovered that beautiful products function better. And they did experiments in Japan that were reproduced in Israel that showed that people using ATMs, when they reported one that they found more beautiful, they found it easier to use, even though in the tests, the processes were exactly the same. And Don Norman explains it like this. Attractive things make people feel good, which in turn makes them more creative. And so they're better able to confront problems when they find them. This is an example of the most beautiful phone ever. A lot of the interface was designed by a designer called Peter Skillman, who's now at Microsoft, and it's an example of a phone with a really beautiful, simple interface. It felt good, it had beautiful graphics and animation. It was a triumph of design and engineering. Unfortunately, it came out about the month when Nokia was sold to Microsoft, and so the whole thing was cancelled. And they gave away to some people, I was one of the lucky ones, one of these phones, which was really lovely. And I want to show you a little film that's on the internet, which describes how it works.
Every once in a while, a product comes along that changes our perception of how we use technology and how natural it can feel. We wanted to design a better way to use a phone, and it comes down to one simple gesture: a swipe. In an application, swiping from any edge of the screen takes you home. With no need for a home key, this all-screen phone makes more room for apps to shine and is incredibly easy to use. We looked at the most important things that people need to do with their phone every day, using apps, getting notifications, and switching between different activities. For each of these, we designed a recognizable home view. The first is where you launch and organize your applications. The second gathers all your notifications and social network feeds in one place. It's the fast and easy way to stay up to date. And the third view shows everything you've been doing recently. All your live apps are ready for you to pick up where you left off. This is the best multitasking on any phone.
Sadly, these really beautiful examples are a little rare, but we're getting more of them, which I'm very, very cheered by. This is an example of how things can go seriously wrong. This was an app by Withings, which is a French firm that make scales, weighing scales, and blood pressure monitors. And this was the app you had in your mobile phone. It was quite jolly. I'd get up in the morning, I'd have a look and see how I was going. I could see very clearly the different kinds of things that it was tracking for me. But then one day, the rebranding by Nokia came online, and suddenly the nice apps disappeared. And we got this. And in the Nokia version, the graphic design doesn't allow you to see so well the progress you're making. It's got the colors don't differentiate the different kinds of things that it's tracking so easily, so you can't see at a glance. And it's difficult to find things, and there's not much meaningful or fun interactivity. And I've given up using it because it's just no fun. And it's a failure of graphic design and interactivity and interaction design. And it's a failure of design for emotion. Because they didn't think, well, what do I as a user want? What's going to keep me trying to lose weight? It's not a miserable app like this, I can tell you. So form communicates. And I want to show you a couple of projects by a firm in Boston called Design Matters, and they make medical devices for the developing world. And this was their first product. It's a baby incubator for premature babies. And it was very technically advanced. It looked great. It won awards, but it never got off the ground in the developing world. And what they realized was that they had to design for how people are, not how they thought they should be. And they should start from manufacturing and distribution, not cool technology. And the company they worked for, they got to work with in Vietnam, made products like this. And they were incredibly robust, they worked well, and they treated thousands of babies. But the problem is that when the designers from Design That Matters talked to people in hospitals, they found that some people in hospitals would rather have no equipment than equipment that looks like this. They know what's available in the West, and they'd rather have nothing than stuff that looks as if it's been thrown together. And they don't trust it. And this was the product that Design That Matters came up with. Designers and engineers worked together to make something that worked practically and culturally. It's manufacturable, it's affordable, and it's trustworthy for the doctors in the hospital and the foundations that are going to donate it. And as Tim Postero, the engineer in charge of the product, said in his TED talk, appearances matter. And I want to finish by talking about a BBC series that was coordinated by an ex-student of mine from Ivrea, I'm very proud to say. And the idea of the series was to show how designers and engineers work together and how design is done and how products come into the world. But what they thought is, okay, we're going to do this, but they put out a call to ordinary people for people who have real problems in their life that maybe design and engineering could fix for them, the big life fix. And they chose 6 products that they thought they could make. And they ranged from preventing sheep stealing in Wales to a camera for a disabled boy, games to help 2 teenagers with cystic fibrosis to keep them doing these incredibly boring exercises that they have to do to keep healthy. And then the last one, which I'm going to show you, was an aid for a young sufferer of Parkinson's disease. And you can find this on the website of the BBC Stories channel if you Google Emma's Watch.
Right, I'm going to try and replicate this here. We're off to a great start. I tend to kind of just avoid doing sketching and writing now because it's not really worth it if you get something like that. Anything you could do that would just make my hand do what I want it to do and to be able to sign my name would be an incredible thing.
How do we even just begin to help her overcome this particular symptom of her tremors and helping her be able to regain her writing ability, her drawing ability? You know, I don't think we're ever going to get that back 100%.
Tremors you get from Parkinson's, so the spoon actually vibrates in opposition to how your hand might be shaking, and therefore it is steady.
I'm making a very rough prototype, and what this board does is I can connect into it through these wires, these tiny coin cell motors. So these motors will vibrate Hello.
Hi, I'm Alison.
It's affecting something. I don't quite know what's happening. Something is going on with it.
What this is doing is it's short-circuiting whatever feedback loop there is between the brain and the hand that's causing the tremors. I'm on to something, right? I'm on to something.
Woo. Woo.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God.
It makes me forget that I have a tremor. I haven't drawn one of them for a long time. I'm so casual about it. Yeah, I'm just going to draw a straight line. I've actually just written my name for like the first time in ages.
I can't believe it.
Mum, it's called the Emma.
Oh, brilliant.
It's got my name on it.
So I think my message is this. Hi, Anne. Studied as a computer scientist, but she's also an interaction designer, and she works with designers, and the team that they did all these projects with were designers and engineers. And so my message is this. Together, engineers and designers can achieve great things, things that work well and work well for people. And they're going to make our life on the internet robust, useful and delightful. Thank you.
Questions? I think everybody got a bit emotional there, and you're like, I've got no question.
Yeah, I cried.
Yeah, I know. I think the whole front row was crying.
Well, I think, yeah.
Not just the front row. Okay.
Yeah.
You got everybody emotional.
I think it's a good example of, it reminds us that we need to make practical things that work. You know, that thing worked. But also our life is full of emotion, and we need to recognize that in the things that we are designing.
Okay,
Yes.
we've recovered from the tears on the front row.
Thank you very much. That's super interesting. I was wondering. Thanks, that's super interesting. I was wondering, so this example and a few that you mentioned are absolutely amazing examples of tech for good and using our skills for good. I was wondering whether you're aware of anything that is happening throughout the training process of, like, for example, these like artist designers, so architects, engineers that are going through like formal training processes about listening to communities that aren't themselves or anything like that.
Well, certainly in teaching, I teach interaction design, and you know, one of the first things we say to people is you're designing for people who are not like you. And so I think this is really important. And there's a lot of, I think, design thinking. The whole design thinking process has been great, but that's only half the process. You also need to generate ideas and generate form. And I think that that's what the designers are good at doing. But certainly I worked for a time at Apple, and a team would go out and video people in their homes. And it was incredibly inspiring, inspiring of ideas. And you think, oh, well, we could do something like that. No, that's a good idea. And so I think that I've found that design students hate doing it to begin with. They can't bear going out there and talking to people or observing them. But when they do, they get tremendously inspired. And so it's really important that it's part of their training and they learn how exciting it is. But I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
There's a question right in the middle. We might have to repeat the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
It always gets me, this divide between the arts and the sciences. Do you think we could just eliminate it totally by having everyone get a good scientific background and a good artistic background?
I think you're right.
Specialization.
The specialization, yes, yes. Well, I'm of a generation that my science education was Archimedes' principle and the electric bell. In my day, it was possible to do no science. I think education is moving towards making sure that, to a certain level, young people get a scientific and an arts education. But my feeling is that people are different and they gravitate to different kinds of things. They like doing different kinds of things. And so I think there can be more and more overlaps, and there are some people who do overlap, like Hyan is an example, who trained as an engineer and became a designer. But that is quite rare, and it takes a lot of practice to learn the expertise of another area. So that's why I think that it's good that designers and engineers work together. In Ivrea, which is a school in northern Italy that I ran, we had terrific engineers as students and designers, and the engineers came to understand how designers work, and the designers began to understand the technology and understand what amazing things the engineers were doing. And so I think that's probably more realistic now. Maybe in the future it will change, and the gap between science and the arts will disappear.
Let's thank Gillian.